Welcome, fellow Earthlings. Welcome to A Raging Atheist. I'm your host tonight, John Petersen. Always want to start by thanking Nakasuchi for allowing me to do this once a week on Wednesdays. Now, as you can see from the title of tonight's stream, we're going to talk about the difference between epistemology and ontology and what constitutes justified true belief. The reason that I came up with this idea is on James's channel, Modern Day Debate at 9:30 tonight. And oh, wow, you guys got to see me for a few minutes. I forgot to turn my avatar on. I'm going to take my ugly face away and put my horse up. I've been on camera before, but I just don't like to scare the audience away with my ugly mug.
Yeah, I'm going to say the horse is a lateral move.
Definitely a lateral move. I especially like the one that Nakasuchi uses for me in the thumbnails. He has the braying ass with its mouth wide open. But so on Modern Day Debate tonight at 9:30, Dr. Seigart, who's a Christian, Rabbi John Grishala, who's Jewish, Suris, who is an atheist, and Eliakai, who is a polytheist, they are going to get together and have a four-way discussion about those, four different schools of thought or ideologies or religions, whatever you want to call them. And so I thought it would be a good idea to get together and talk about, as I said before, epistemology, ontology, and what constitutes, justified true belief. And I'm joined tonight by Hogtie Champ, Nate Broady, and Barney Tearspell. Dragnauct Sylvas will be joining us in a few minutes. He's just running a few minutes late. And in the live chat, I posted from my other channel, the Amateur Conversationalist. I just interviewed Drag on my the Amateur Conversationalist channel on this past Sunday, and I linked to that in the live chat. So please, when you get a chance, check that out. But let's welcome our guests. First, Hogtie Champ, how are you doing tonight? Thank you for coming by.
Well, I'm doing well, having fun. I'm looking forward to a rare chit chat online. Hopefully, it's fun.
And Nate, welcome.
Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everybody. I'm Nate Broady. If you guys don't know me, go to my channel, and you'll see what I'm about. Lawyer, YouTuber, yada yada yada. But thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
And Barney Tearspell, I also interviewed him on the Amateur Conversationalist. That's the episode the week before on Sunday, before this last one with Drag. How are you doing tonight, Barney?
I'm sleepy as hell, but otherwise awesome.
And actually, maybe I should say good morning to you, given where you're at. But
yeah, it's 1 a.m.
So, as I was telling these gentlemen, before starting, I was sincere in the video description. I am the idiot in the room, and I've asked these four gentlemen, Drag will be here in a little bit, who are much smarter than me on these subjects, to help me understand these better. The three that are here now in Drag have many conversations amongst themselves on Discord and elsewhere. They've known each other for a long time, and they talk about everything from the deep subjects to the mundane. So you won't hear me interjecting a lot. I'm asking a lot of questions, as I don't understand things. And I'll just, to start with, let's just in general terms talk about what epistemology is and how that differs from ontology. And, I'll let you guys decide who's going to get the ball rolling.
Actually, before you jump into that, I did send to each of you, I sent it to Drag as well, the link to the pop-out chat. As viewers pile up, it's kind of nice. We can keep an eye on their thing.
How did the press?
Oh, okay. Yeah. As a matter of fact, when you're hosting a StreamYard event, I have the, the YouTube chat is right up on my screen here. And so you're saying you were able to, where you can pop it out in a different window or something like that. Okay. But
yeah, I'm doing a classic YouTube way of doing it. It's funny because when you were saying about how these other guys are the smartest guys, no, I'm the total lunkhead here. I've never used the StreamYard before, so I'm trying to learn along with you guys. But yeah, go ahead. Epistemology.
But Barney, would you like to kick it off, Nate?
Sure. So we're broadly talking about philosophy. More specifically, we're talking about metaphysics, which a lot of people will find odd, because when in the atheist circles, when we talk about these things, we use terms of epistemology and ontology commonly, and then you will often get somebody, if you mention metaphysics, get angry about, no, we need to use science. So from my understanding, the hierarchy goes something like physics, from Greek nature, physikos, physios, and is basically the description of what exists in nature. What is the nature of things? Metaphysics is talking about how we can talk about those things. And the two primary branches of metaphysics are ontology and epistemology. Ontology literally deals with what things are, what is existence, what is real, as opposed to what is non-existent, what is like, how we can ascribe meaning to things. Epistemology, what meaning there is in things. Epistemology is how we can know that. What is knowledge, what is belief, what is truth, in which way can we access information about the ontology of things, and how we can evaluate the truth of those things. And kind of the third big branch of metaphysics that I presume we won't be talking about here is axiology, which is the study of values, which then in some ways subsumes ethics and aesthetics. Ethics as in what is right and wrong, and aesthetics as in what is beautiful. Does that cover it?
Yeah, and I did see. Yeah, that's a good overview of this portion of the discussion. And I did see some about the axiology, and kind of like ignored that when I was doing my reading and watching it, because it did seem like it was talking about, I didn't want to go down that huge of a rabbit hole. But Hogtie or Nate, is there anything you want to add to what Barney said?
I was going to let Hogtie go, but no, I think he laid it out pretty succinctly. It's interesting because we always have arguments about, like I always argue with Ozzy about, what theory of knowledge best represents, reality. And it's interesting because now that we're speaking about these terms in such a categorical way, I've always been used to talking about these, like when we usually have conversations, we don't only say we're only going to talk about epistemology. We kind of mesh everything together. And now I'm seeing, like, when we do that, we'll usually have a lot of confusion because we'll switch from ontology to epistemology, and it gets confusing. So it's interesting. It's going to be an interesting discussion.
Well,
right,
okay,
and I've noticed. Go ahead, Hogtie.
Okay, so I got like 5 people here talking to me at once. Can you do what now? Sure, whatever. Light it on fire. I don't care. I'm going to. I know. Yeah, I know. Anyway, no. What I was going to say, maybe it's sort of a bit of a context setter too. There's something I've been thinking about a while, as we've had these discussions with Christians and their, especially the presuppositionalists and whatnot, and I've identified what I think is a real mistake in how they approach epistemology. And not that we're here, I know, to talk about precept, but I just want to sort of maybe set the stage a little bit by pointing out what the exercise actually is. And that is, you might hear people use terms. We're going to talk about foundationalism or coherentism or found-herentism and these different sort of approaches. And I would suggest, I don't know if you guys agree or not, but you don't want to look at those things as like different camps, like, well, I'm a found-herentist, so I reason according to the following rules. Whereas Nate might say, oh, but I'm a foundationalist, so my reasoning proceeds by these rules, right? You can go ahead and reason the way you want to reason, but I'm going to reason the way I want to reason. I don't think that's the exercise. I think what it is we're saying we do reason, and we're trying to understand how we reason. We might have different notions about how we reason, but it's not that one group of people reasons one way and another group of people reasons another way. Like some people vote Republican and others vote Democrat. We recognize that we reason, but we're asking ourselves, how does that happen? What is the basis for our reason? So we're not trying to argue in favor of a particular or better way of reasoning, but instead we're trying to come up with, as Nate put it a moment ago, about that matches reality. There's some reality in that we're doing some reasoning, and how does it happen? We're trying to say, look, I think we all reason by these rules. And Nate might say, no, I disagree. I think we all reason by these other rules. And the question then is Nate's view about how we all reason closer to reality, or is my view about how we all reason closer to reality? It's a big difference, as opposed to like this camp, you reason this way, I reason that way.
Hey, Hogtie, I want to ask you a quick question. Do you are you using reason to justify your reasoning?
Sure. No, I'm not.
That's the precept. That's the precept.
Yeah, no, it is. You know what? In the not to derail us, but the was it Alex Botten and Jim Gardner? What the hell is it called? They had a show, Fundamentally Flawed. They had a little card thing at the beginning. So before the show started, they would play this thing, and it had a countdown timer for when the show was starting. And there were little text things on the bottom that was telling you, it's sort of like computer booting up and, downloading whatever, installing references, that sort of thing. But one of the little cards there was using reason to justify reason. And it was in like 4-point font. And Alex Botten thinks it was one of the funniest things he's ever typed. And he knows nobody ever saw it because it's such tiny little letters. But yeah, using reason to justify your reason.
So Nate brought it up, theory of knowledge, or different theories of knowledge. And I'm not sure exactly, what those are. But when you say theories of knowledge, are you talking about things like empiricism and rationalism, idealism, things like that? Or you want to flesh that out, Nate?
Yeah, well, I'm just talking about, the basic question would be, first, is it even possible for us to actually know something? And then if we do, how best can you describe that? And I think philosophers have for years, for centuries, have been trying to even just understand that question. First, kind of what is knowledge? And then how do we, is knowledge something that's already out there that we have to find, or is knowledge just a social construct? This is the, so it seems that there are theories that people have put forward to say, well, this is how we know what knowledge is, or this is how we understand knowledge. And some people describe it as justified true belief. And, there are issues with that. And I think there's rational true belief, which some other people like. So that's when I'm talking about theories of knowledge, those are some of the things that I'm talking about in terms of, how is it that we can know something? And if we do, is it really knowledge, or is it something, or, is it really knowledge? And if it is, then, how can I show that to you? How can I show you that I actually know something? And I like justified true belief because it says I'm justified, it's true, and I believe it, but, the devil's in the details. How do we know it's true? How are you really justified? What about certain things like Gettier cases, which, you could be justified, true, and believe, but you didn't know it, so there's a lot to break down when you just say, what are the theories of knowledge, and how do we know anything?
Well, and you brought up Gettier, and that's notes I had here too, to, hopefully gain a better understanding on the problem of the definition of knowledge, and is, the question of whether justified true belief is knowledge. And again, this is something that, Barney or Hogtie, any of you can, the notes I took is it said philosophical epistemology has two branches, empiricism and rationalism. Could you guys talk about the difference between those?
That sounds like a Barney question.
I knew that was going to land in my lap.
And just to give you a thumbnail of just a short note I wrote, so you can tell me if this rudimentary explanation is right. Empiricism, what it said, the video I watched, that knowledge comes from our senses, but in rationalism, it emphasized reason. Descartes said that, he believed that we are born with an innate knowledge and can deduce truths through mental reasoning without input from our senses. But go ahead, Barney.
I'm going to do the dishonest thing and completely ignore your question, because I actually want to talk about what we started talking about knowledge and justified true belief. So one thing is that philosophy kind of gets a maligned name in common parlance, like especially scientists and atheists and like everyday people consider philosophy as kind of doing the vapid, meaningless talking about something. The origin of it is thinking correctly, literally being as right as possible while being as little wrong, while being as the least amount of wrong as possible. And knowledge in that concept, in that structure, is literally, where do you give up in your research? Where do you say, I know enough about this thing, I have enough information about this thing to be confident about what I know? So that's one view. That's kind of a subjectivist view of knowledge, which is signified as lower k, the knowledge that I can possess, the assurance that things that I believe, that the information that I hold in my head to be true is correct, is aligned with reality. Upper K knowledge is that which is actually reliant on the truth of the fact, which is reliant on reality, which is in real accordance with reality without possibility of being false. So if we're talking about justified true belief as an upper K knowledge, then like, is it enough to know, is it enough to believe in a thing which is really true? It's not, because you get the effect of a broken watch, right? A broken watch is correct 2 times a day. Is it really correct? No, it's broken. The fact that the truth coalesces with the fact of what's shown on the watch is kind of meaningless. The fact that you believe a true thing without having the reason to believe it cannot be wisdom, cannot be a correct way of thinking, because it'll land you in trouble in a lot of ways. So what was proposed, I think it was originally proposed by Plato or somebody like that, but it was kind of later on gained popularity in Enlightenment, was that notion of justified true belief. Yes, the belief, yes, the fact has to be true. Yes, you have to believe it to be true, but you need some reason, some justification. You need to be able to know what your reasons for believing it are, and to serve up those reasons for inspection as evidence that your belief is actual knowledge. Right? And in common parlance, especially in debates, this actually gets used a lot, whether we are aware of it or not. Somebody wanted to ask something?
Well, I was going to say, I praise that. I kind of wish I'd done what Barney had done. I sort of jokingly said, "Oh, let Barney handle it," because a little bit, I felt a little bit sort of weighted out in the water there, because you're mentioning empiricism and what was the other one? Rationalism. My understanding is that those things are related to theories of justification, right? And I wonder if it would help if we just start, at least briefly, because we're kind of, if we start from the what is knowledge, or what is a belief, what is knowledge?
Yeah. I was about to say that too. Yeah, because
I think where the issue, and just to warn people ahead, especially if you're there's going to be 2 problems. If you've all heard all this before, you're going to find this to be a bit of a rehash. If this is new, then brace yourself for this frustration. Is that when people talk about epistemology, they'll say, well, it's about reasoning towards knowledge, right? Well, then what is knowledge? Well, knowledge is justified true belief. Oh, well, what is justification, right? And it's going to sound like we're just kicking the can down the road, because every time this comes up, so someone's going to say, what's knowledge? We're going to say, well, it's justified true belief. Well, we have to first agree on what a belief is. And then, well, true and false are pretty obvious to people, but I'm sure at some point someone's going to say justified true belief is a good approach to saying this is what we refer to as knowledge. But then it's going to lead us into a discussion about justification, and I think that's where all the heavy lifting is. So can we back up a step then and talk about beliefs and then knowledge? And,
yeah. So let's define belief. Like what would anyone in here define belief as?
I've heard them say, well, it's your doxastic position, right? And it's one of those things where philosophers will come up with a phrase. They'll say, well, rather than just using a word that's out there in common parlance, like belief, we're going to just create another phrase. We're just going to reserve it for this technical purpose. But there's a reason why they do that. And this is sort of, for us and for the audience as well, it's worth keeping in mind. You have to shed a little bit, like give a little bit of ground here on this issue. If you think you know what those words mean, we're not going to use those words the way they're used commonly. So, for example, if I say, the Calgary Flames are going to win the Stanley Cup, so you believe that? And they go, oh, I don't believe it. I know it, right? That's the kind of thing that people say. Now, it doesn't make any sense, because if I say that the Calgary Flames are going to win the Stanley Cup, and then if you say, well, do you believe it? And then I say, no, I don't believe it. But you just said it, so why would you say it? Well, no, it's not that I believe it. It's that I know it. That somehow there's a weird partitioning of knowledge and belief.
Well, hold on. Let me jump in. Let me jump in here and give my response, because I'm the idiot in the room. When I think belief, to me, a belief is an idea about reality that you hold to be true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The best context for it is to look at a proposition. So, and it's easiest to discuss it if you have a proposition that is like a true-false statement. So, all giraffes are purple, right? That's a statement. And in reality, that statement is either true or false. Now, if I were to ask you, what is your position? Would you state a position on it? And it's only slightly thorny because of the whole notion that sometimes you will state a position, but secretly at some level, you don't really realize that you actually feel differently. Let's not worry about that for now. If I ask you, do you think that, giraffes are purple, like all giraffes are purple, is that a true or false statement? You're going to say, well, my position, my belief is that that's a false statement.
Immutable Destiny asking for the panelists, under the notion of justified true belief, you must assert a priori that the nature of causality is dependent on time being continuous. No. I disagree with that statement. Yes, temporal causality is the easiest to think about and is the simplest to think about, where you're talking about the causality of events. This event caused this event caused this event, but there are many other forms of causes, material causes and efficient causes, and right. There are concepts of actualization, things that enable a thing to happen, where you have strong and weak actualization, where a strong actualization is a direct cause, right? Even if it's completely atemporal, where weak found, let's say, my eyes, my visual cortex are the material causes of my seeing. They enable me to see. But if I'm in a dark room and you turn on the light, then you are the weak cause of my seeing. You have enabled my seeing. So in these kind of layman debates about philosophy, what often gets shoved aside and pushed aside and forgotten is that no event has one cause. You cannot identify a single cause. Like, for everything that happens, reality must be a cause. You need reality to affect that to be possible. Universe must be a cause for you to exist in it. The whole sequence of events that preceded it must be a cause. So you cannot just kind of whittle down everything to say, oh, this cause had this effect.
I do want to move back to the belief discussion, if that's okay. Well, yeah. Just because you're answering an audience question, but see, I've always thought of belief as someone accepting a proposition as true or false, right? If someone tells me the car is red and I say I believe that, I'm accepting that it's true. Or somebody says the car is not red and I say I believe that, it's accepting a proposition is true. And what is a proposition? Because I don't want somebody to say, well, damn, what's now what are propositions? And propositions are statements about reality. And is that good enough for us to move forward with to get to the next step? The understanding that belief is an acceptance of a proposition as either true or false.
Well, in a propositional sense, yes. Right? If you formulate reality such that it is the set of all true statements, of all true propositions, and no false propositions, then yes, you can say that belief is just assigning a truth value to a proposition.
Now, the next
I would say generally. I'm sorry. I was just going to say I would say generally speaking, the definition I gave would maybe efficient, but your answer, Nate, refines it better. It defines the terms a little bit better, I would say.
Oh, cool. I appreciate that. Then the next piece is that do we all accept in a relationship between knowledge and belief? Like I would always state that all knowledge encompasses belief. If you know something, it's a fact. It's true that you also believe it. And if you don't believe something, it's true that you don't know it, right? You have to, or is that contention there?
That's what I understand knowledge to be, knowledge being a subset of belief. But then when people, I guess in common parlance, state that, well, I don't believe this, I know it. That is simply a turn of phrase. They don't actually mean that there's a physical separation between the two. Is that they're speaking on certitude, right? Not the classification of knowledge itself being unique from belief.
Yes, it's mere belief. It is.
I was about to say.
I believe this and nothing more.
Yeah, I was about to say, if Ozzy were here, he would surely caution us all about. And yes, it's fine if people want to use the word belief as mere belief, but just for a conversation like this, it's important. Don't confuse belief with the notion of mere belief. That I just have a good, happy gut feeling about it, and but I don't really have a justification for it or no evidence for it. No. So a belief is just your position. Whether or not you have justification, whether or not you have confidence, whether or not you have justified confidence, don't worry about any of that stuff. If it's the position you hold, then that's your belief.
Well, and there was a back and forth on Twitter yesterday that talked about this, where someone was telling like a young Earth creationist, well, don't believe evolution, study it and learn to know that it's true. And then someone, jumped in and said, well, wait a minute. No, you can't tell them not to believe it, because if they're going to know it, they also believe it, because like Drag said, knowledge is a subset of belief, so you can believe things without knowing them with certitude, but you can't know anything without also believing it.
But now I would also interject now then that means in any definition or any working model of being able to know something has to encompass belief, right? Because if it's a subset of belief. So when we talk about, justified true belief or rational true belief or whatever, that belief concept, we're all assuming it is within the definition or within that understanding of knowledge, correct?
Yeah.
So now let's get to knowledge, because now we've fleshed out belief, right? And and now we're talking about knowledge. Now the question seems the natural progression would be, how do you obtain knowledge? Because we understand how I would suggest everybody understands how we obtain beliefs. Even though some say it's compulsory, or do you guys want to go to how do we obtain beliefs, or do you guys want to move to how do we obtain knowledge and how do we define knowledge?
That's actually a really good point, because speaking of Ozzy, since we're going to invoke him, let's do a straw poll in the chat, and Hogtie and Barney might know where I'm going with this. How many of you choose your beliefs in the chat? Put 1 if you choose your beliefs, put 2 in the chat if you don't choose your beliefs. And I mean actively, like, select claims to adopt as your personal beliefs, not preferences. Now there's a difference. Not my favorite ice cream is chocolate. That's a preference. That's not a belief. Hogtie gave an example earlier about his soccer team, whatever sport they play in Canada. So that's the distinction.
That's ice soccer.
Excuse me, ice soccer.
Whole lot of 2 so far.
Okay.
So it seems like everybody's saying beliefs are compulsory.
Well, or that you don't choose them.
Yeah, so but this brings up a lot of questions just about beliefs, for instance, because then, if beliefs are compulsory, then me not believing in God, and free will, this brings up the question of free will, because I'm a product of my belief and I act upon my beliefs, and if they are compulsory, then how could I be held responsible?
I think, and let me jump in here real quick. I apologize. I said I wasn't going to interject too much, but I think using the word compulsory is the wrong word, though, because all that we're saying by that you don't choose your beliefs is that you can't, okay, so like I'm an atheist right now. I used to be a Christian. I didn't just one day choose to be an atheist. It was that I, was learn different things, and I moved from one position to another. It wasn't like a conscious choice. I mean, it just happened. I mean, I don't know.
And that's what I mean. That's kind of what I mean by that's what I mean by compulsion, is that it's either, and I'm using them, and maybe I'm using them in the I'm using it as a dipole. It's either or. Either you choose, or either you're forced, or it's compulsory. And maybe that may be incorrect. So either if you're saying you choose your beliefs, then that's one way. But then if you're saying that's false, I do not choose my beliefs, then I'm saying you believe by compulsion. You have no choice in the matter.
That clears it up for me to use the other form of the word compulsion. Compulsory, I in my head I was thinking that it was, like one of those
imposed upon you.
Imposed by the government. Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is why I say I was suggesting before, and maybe I'll take this back because it's only people do want to talk about. This is the thing. It's exciting because this is the thing I said. We should probably stay off this, but it's a good. It is about how beliefs are formed, and whether it's choosable or not. It's fuzzy and it's an interesting area. One of the things that I think is I don't think it's easy to say all beliefs are subject to choice or compulsion by the circumstances. Because I think it's too easy to say something like, well, geez, if there are beliefs that are chosen, let me try it. I'm going to stand outside, I'm going to stare at the sky, and I'm going to convince myself that that's orange. The sky is orange, right? It doesn't. The more you stare at it, the more you're going to convince yourself that it's blue. There are many beliefs that are directed by your circumstances, your experience of looking at the sky, your experience with the color blue. You're kind of stuck with it. But I do think there's another subset of beliefs that maybe they are a little more fuzzy, where you do kind of choose, you want to choose to believe that your wife is faithful, things like that. So I think the problem is that there isn't just one rule to say, well, beliefs are always compulsory or beliefs are always chosen. I think there's some weird gray area in there.
I don't know, because I'm trying to figure out.
Binary.
Can you guys? Well, give me. For instance, I would like then an example of a belief that you choose, or a belief that something that you choose to believe, or something that you choose not to believe. Because, like, for me, everything that I believe, it's been because of circumstance, because of whatever happens, and these beliefs or things that I don't believe in are kind of just like we were saying before. I choose not to believe in God. It's just kind of like I've been convinced that one doesn't exist. So if you guys, I would say all my beliefs are compulsory, and I've never been presented with someone who has been able to show me that they've actually chosen to believe. But maybe you guys can give me an example.
So in that very naive phrasing, I don't think I can give you a clear example. I can give you something that approximates. I choose to believe that my marriage will work out. That is to say, there are many days where I doubt that. There are many days where many situations in which I see the inevitable end of my marriage. And there are other days where everything is great and fine, and I see us working out together. And in that epistemic uncertainty, I do get a choice. I do get a choice in which way I will act, which of those things will actualize my other choices and my other actions. And that I've actually been accused of that being similar to faith.
I mean, is that really choosing your belief, or is that just optimism versus pessimism?
Yeah, it seems like you're just being more optimistic about something than choosing to believe something.
Well, I think if we were to move to again, this sort of jumps to other areas of philosophy, but I think that what you're describing, Barney, and by the way, I'm glad you went first because your example was better than the one I was going to go with, is the pragmatists, like when they say, like, what is, soon we'll get into a discussion about, well, what do we mean when we say that something is true within a worldview? The pragmatists will say, well, what is really true is what is useful to you. And that's a great example, because if somebody were to say, okay, here's the proposition, your marriage will work out. That's a proposition. Is it true or false? Well, in reality, we don't, there is a, you don't know. So I guess you could try to reason through it by saying, well, let's look at the actuarials. What percentage of marriages survive? Well, amongst people that have similar demographics as my wife and I, well, what percentage of those marriages survive? But nobody does that analysis, right? You kind of look at your situation and you recognize, I would be better off if I go through my day having some confidence, having some faith that this marriage is going to work out, whether that's justified or not. So what's weird, though, is that this is why I say those weird circumstances, because there are circumstances where, and people are going to wonder, are Barney and Hogtie having marital problems? It's just an example. But there are signs, right? Like, your wife says she's at work, but then she has to stay late at work, but then she's not at work, and she comes home, you can smell wine on her, maybe some aftershave, but then you have an explanation.
Okay, Hogtie might have some marital problems.
Yes, I think this is starting to get serious right now. No, but you know what? Listen to this. I'm sorry, Hogtie, you weren't finished.
Just I want to wrap up my point. Is that I think most people are familiar with this experience anyway. Is that when there seems to be some level in your brain where you're starting to recognize the truth, but if asked about it, the most frontal thought is no, everything's fine, everything's fine. And then there's this moment where you quote unquote change your mind about it. And later, when you reflect on it, you seem to have this sense that, well, I didn't really change my mind. It's I came to recognize that I believe differently. This is a great example. There is atheism, because there are so many people who say, when you say, what happened at that moment you became an atheist? They'll go, I don't know. I remember the day I went to myself, I guess it turns out I'm an atheist, and I have been for the last 2 years. So there are these weird fuzzy examples where you have an expressed belief and one you think you believe, but the weight, the accumulation of facts contrary to that belief finally make you break your will, and the belief is thrust upon you by the weight of the facts. But there was that period of time first where you managed to resist it. So
well, the way I'm understanding you guys, your examples are, for instance, with the whole marriage thing. Some days I believe my marriage will work out. Some days I do not. So in the more specific times when we're saying, I believe this, I believe that, I do agree beliefs can change based on evidence that's presented. But I don't think at any point I would say, I may want my marriage to work. I may want these things to happen, but at no point do I say I'm choosing to believe that it's going to work. It's it's already there. You know what I'm saying? And maybe at different points that my beliefs about it will change, but at no point am I actually making a conscious choice to believe in something or not to believe in something. Usually, it's the evidence that's presented that would either help me formulate or convince me to believe that, or convince me not to believe that. And as a counterexample, I would use the David, I hate using this guy's example, but David Silverman has a great example of where he tells you, how lie detectors, the reason why lie detectors aren't used in court is because what happens is people could be telling the truth, but it may not be the actual truth. Like you may say, I saw Jack at the grocery store shooting the clerk. And that person may believe they saw Jack, but it may be somebody totally different. They may have somebody who looked like Jack, but really believe it's Jack. And if you put a lie detector on them, they'll say they're telling the truth, and the jury may believe that and convict this person, but it may not actually be the truth. And it actually happens all the time with witness testimony. But in this instance, if you have someone who you're asking, okay, I want you to believe that God exists. Like, say, if you strap me to a chair and ask me, I am ordering you to believe that God exists, and they put a lie detector on my arm and take a gun out and put it to my head and say, if this lie detector, when I ask you, do you believe in God? I want you to answer yes. And if this lie detector goes off and says you're lying, I'm going to blow your brains out. Now, for me, when that question is asked and I say, yes, I believe in God, that lie detector is going to go off. I cannot change that. There's no way I can change it. Even with my life on the line, even if they put my kids in the chair and say, I'm going to kill your kids. There's no way I can change that belief at that moment under that stress. Now that's why that's my counterexample to say I believe beliefs are compulsory, because even in those extreme situations, you can't choose to believe something.
Yes, but that's covered under the statement. It's not that binary. It's not that black and white. If you frame it to be black and white, if you frame it to be either nothing or all, then you will find counterexamples on both sides. And that to me is just an indication that it's not that. Another example that I can give for some form of voluntary belief is willful ignorance. For if you suspect or have the basic information that there might be some knowledge beyond what you know, or some information beyond what you know, but you find that knowledge to be either too complicated, too not valuable, too abhorrent, or aesthetically like displeasing, or even morally wrong, you can choose not to look at the evidence.
Or I would add to what you just said, if it's some kind of knowledge that contradicts a belief that you hold to be true and dear to you. You know, like say, you know, Christians that, or other, you know, theists who may ignore some information that they have been given or that they've seen that contradicts their current beliefs.
Precisely, yes.
So, Drag, we haven't heard from you in a bit. Are we keeping you out of this, or?
No. There are kind of things I want to interject with, but people keep bringing up great points. So I'm just going to shut the hell up. Because
well, right. And I was going to tell you, you know, the thing that you linked to me in the internal chat there that you wanted to bring up, you know, whenever you feel is the right time to bring that up, I'm sure we'll move towards that at some point.
Yeah, that's a very specific, like that takes time. This is something that Sock Account knows quite a bit about. And I think Hogtie, I'm mentioning the Munchausen trilemma for those of you who are wondering, because I am vaguely familiar with this through a little bit of my knowledge of Karl Popper, but my knowledge in this topic is very, very minimal. So I try not to interject with things that I know very little about, because that's how you put your foot in your mouth. But I think it brings up a very good point. And someone touched on it earlier about justifications for what we consider to be knowledge, or I guess truth. So I want to pocket it for right now, because I think we were just getting past belief and getting to knowledge. So I don't want to break that momentum.
Well, actually, that's a good segue, because I think we're more or less done with the whole beliefs discussion. So
Yeah,
it seems to be like a nice segue.
Well, and before we move on, I just want to say that this and not that it really matters, because I normally defer to Barney on any of these type topics, but you haven't convinced me. I still think it is binary and more closely to what Nate was saying, because the examples you're given and that I added to, I don't think that necessarily falls under the category of, you know, of holding a belief. I think those are like ancillary, I don't know what word I'm looking for, like kind of a you know, like window dressing to belief. You know, I mean, if I'm still thinking it's binary. It's either you're able to choose, which I think we've ruled that out, that you can choose your beliefs, or it's compulsory, like Nate said. And I'm still not really getting what you're saying about there's like a gray area in between there.
Okay, in that case, there might be another topic that we need to cover before we get to knowledge, and that's the theory of meaning. So that there are very many different ways of looking at reality and what things are real and what are not. The way that I learned how to define things that are real, there are things that are actual and things that are real. All things that are actual are real. Not all things that are real are actual. Things that are real and aren't actual are things which are emergent from other actual things. So let's say The actual things are things which exist in themselves, which are the base of reality, which are the things which don't need further explanation for their existence. Things we literally take for granted. Right? Other real things we don't need to take for granted, and those will be defined by categories and classes and properties, and our cognitive way of kind of dissecting the world and grouping things together, where every group is real, but the fact that we can create infinitely many groups and divide anything arbitrarily as we choose seems to indicate that those groups are not real. So, for example, when you say that there are dogs, right?
Okay.
A dog is a category. If there are no minds to ascribe value to the meaning of the word dog, do dogs still exist? Now, there are some things that we call dogs that we put into the set that we call dogs. Those things will exist. We choose to delineate that group by whether they can reproduce and whether they have certain lineage and stuff like that. But those are completely arbitrary. And the way that I can kind of show that those are completely arbitrary is that I can make up a completely new category that never existed before but is still real. So if I say that there is a category called Flurgle, which is a dog that has scratched with his left paw behind his right ear, sometimes in the last 5 minutes. That definition, that description of a category ascribes to a set of real things, right? That set might be empty, but there might be Flurgles out there in the world, and some dogs are right now becoming Flurgles, and some are stopping being Flurgles if 5 minutes has elapsed since they last did it. And we can do that arbitrarily, and it will just combining things into new and new categories and new distributions.
It starts to sound like Platonic forms.
This is a counter to Platonic forms.
Okay.
Platonic forms says that those categories are actual, that they are the real nature of reality, and that everything in reality is just ascribed to those categories because of similarity to the ideals of those forms, right? This is kind of a counter to that, saying, well, I am a God who can create infinitely many new forms. And that makes the concept kind of valueless. But the reason why I'm saying that, it's related to science and it's related to epistemology. When you take physics, we've been exploring physics for thousands of years, trying to figure out laws of motions, the interactions between things, predict what's going to happen. Only when we came up with the categories of force, of energy, of momentum, only when we have found categories which are delineated in such a way that we can always reliably function with them, did we get the modern science of physics, right? Before that, we had a lot of terms that kind of aggregated those or split those in half, and in physics that's called non-realism. That's philosophical non-realism, where those things don't have their own existence. They are just cognitive terms that we use to describe this, that we categorize things into order that we can recognize.
Wait.
Now, the way that it's related to what John was objecting to is that we all do that, whether we want to admit it or not. That is kind of the way our minds work. We as human beings categorize things and conceptualize them differently from each other. So what might be apparent to me might be dependent on the categories that I ascribe to things. What might be apparent to you might be dependent on the categories, and that's where a lot of equivocation comes in. And that's kind of the main reason why I have joined these debate communities, was when I started noticing that I talk to people and we use the same word with the same meaning, and we agree on the definition, and we still somehow disagree on the meaning of the word. And that phenomena is the one that fascinates me a lot. So when you say belief for me is a binary choice, that kind of hints to me that you think belief is something more basic than what I believe it is, and that you see everything else as kind of complications and turbulence on top of that pure ideal thing, which is belief, which is a binary true or false, or voluntary or non-voluntary, and stuff like that.
Well, hold on. Two things you said. One, well, first, before I even ask my question, Jay and Immutable would be great to get in here one day, because these guys really love to talk about this topic, and they're really knowledgeable. So just want to give out the shout out to Jay and Immutable in the chat. Jay, Immutable, what's up? But for Barney, I'm trying to understand, because I've always assumed, and maybe this is maybe, and this may be me bringing in law to philosophy, which may be a mistake and an ignorance on my part. So please excuse me if this is a bad counterpoint. But I've always felt that beliefs were binary. It's either you believe or you don't believe. There is no middle ground. Like if I say, do you believe the car is black? You can say you believe it or you don't believe it. You can't say I don't know what I believe. You know what I mean? So is that, am I wrong with that, or is that correct? Is our beliefs binary in that way? Either you believe or you don't believe.
So that's kind of one of the problems of philosophy, is that there is no singular answer to the question you're asking me. In philosophy, there is no settled, definite answer. You need to think it through and figure out for yourself whether that is so or not. I have kind of landed on postmodernism and accepting that everything that we say is kind of a part of our minds, that when you say that means something to you, and if I try really, really, really hard, I can start understanding what you mean by that, and that's enough for me, right? That the fact that I'm trying to keep it in English.
I know it's tough to keep this stuff simple. I know. I can just imagine.
Trying to yell at us in Russian again. While Barney figures that out, before we start, I see where we're going. Before we rehash this, before we go back down this route, it's a really, because I'm not letting you know, we ain't going back there. So
you want to know about knowledge?
Yeah. You two are funny. You two are real funny. But so if we're talking about as a proposition, yes, it is binary. If we're talking about a psychological state of belief, there can be more than two. You can be ambivalent to it, right? Because you don't have that with a propositional form. That really depends on who you're asking in the context. Because if my wife tells me, do I believe that she is annoying? Guess what? Guess what? If I answer that as a proposition, I can get in trouble. If I answer it as a psychological state of belief, I have enough wiggle room to not get in trouble. Therein lies the difference, folks.
That is true. That is 100%.
Epistemology states marriages. So
hold on. Drag just reversed it. It's the psychological state of belief that's binary, and the proposition is the one that you could say I don't know to. It's just reversed. But you're right though. Everything else was right, but it's just reversed.
Is it? I thought he was right about that.
No, psychological states of belief are binary propositions. You can have yes, no, or I don't know. The proposition is if I ask you, for instance, the propositional form of is the car black? Is the car black? You can say yes, the car is black. No, the car is not black. Or I don't know if the car is black or not. If I ask you, do you believe the car is black, which is a psychological state? You see do you believe the car is black? You need to say yes or no. You can't say I don't know. That's
either I do believe. No, that's different. Okay, either I do believe it or I don't. Right.
Yeah, your psychological state of belief.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. Either I do believe it or I don't. But if you ask what my belief is, the example I was going to use, and just to clarify too, that this is not to be confused with the notion of confidence, right? So that if I'm I think, okay, here's an example. So I bought a lottery ticket, and honestly, I'm a pretty practical fellow. I believe that this lottery ticket is not going to win the jackpot, right? That's my actual belief about it. But I mean, if you ask how confident are you, well, I'm pretty confident, right? Like very very high. But that's not the point. If you look at something where it's just like you literally can't even form a belief because you don't have. I'll give you three statements here. One of them is Jupiter is made of the number of atoms in Jupiter is odd or even. The second statement is the number of atoms in Jupiter is odd, and I'm switching molecules now. Anyway, the number of atoms in Jupiter is odd or even. The number of atoms in Jupiter is odd. The number of atoms in Jupiter is even. So three separate statements. The first one, you should say that's true. The number of atoms that make up Jupiter at this instant is either an odd number or an even number. But then if I ask you to take a position on the next two, if one's true, the other one's false. But you would quite rightly say, I don't have a position on it. And that's to be distinguished from circumstances where you do have a position, but you might not be terribly confident about your position. That's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about confidence. We're talking about truly like having an absence of a position on that proposition.
I was about to say before Nate spoke after Drag, I was about to say to Barney, well, hey, Dragnauct kind of cleared that up for me with how he put it, and kind of alleviated some of my confusion. And then Nate interjected, and now I'm confused again. But
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's okay. But let's put this aside for now, and let's go to where we were going to go before I jumped in and knocked us off the rails, and to talk about knowledge now as opposed to belief. And let me just pose this question, and then you guys just go on from there. It is justified true belief. Is it sufficient for knowledge?
So it's my understanding that you can have justified true belief or reliable true belief. And so I used to be on the JTB side, and I've kind of shifted over to the RTB, and I'm still trying to flesh out.
Ozzy got to you.
Yeah. So I had. Well, it wasn't actually Ozzy. I say yeah because Ozzy and Sokka talk, so more than likely. But I had a couple of conversations with Sokka about this, and that how the utility of RTB kind of trumps JTB. And I'm butchering the conversation. He can feel free to bludgeon me later, but I that's the camp that I'm in right now. I am willing to budge. I like this topic, and I want to see where it goes.
Okay, maybe for the audience, we should clarify what JTB and RTB are.
Go ahead, Barney.
So justified true belief, I've already explained it, that it is not enough that you believe. It is not enough that it is a fact, that it is true and you believe it. You need to have some justification for your belief. That has a problem. And the problem is if the justification does not stem from the truth, right? You can have a justification that you can point to, and the fact may be true, and you may believe it, and you still wouldn't call that knowledge.
Well, just like I said before we started, though, too, wouldn't any individual always hold that their beliefs are justified and true? So,
okay, that will depend on whether the individual is a philosopher or not. In the original meaning of the word, right? Where a philosopher will not let himself have unjustified beliefs, or will have a justification for, like a cognizant justification for having unjustified beliefs. There is a great quote by Bertrand Russell, something like, "I would rather be accused by the worst of my enemies amongst the philosophers than by the greatest of my friends that is innocent of philosophy," or something like that.
And then what is the distinction between JTB and RTB?
So RTB is, instead of having a justification, so under RTB, you cannot know that you know. Under JTB, you cannot know that you're right. Under RTB, your knowledge has to be reliably transferred to you from the truth. Your belief has to be reliably transferred to you from the truth.
So, but see, that's a phrase that's always blown my mind. I've heard it before. I can't know that I know. Like,
yes.
I mean, what the fuck does that mean? Like,
it means that you cannot know whether you know that thing. You know it if it has been reliably transferred to you from the truth, but you do not know whether it has been reliably transferred to you.
Yeah, actually, the answer to that question sort of shows that if you kind of build up these definitions, that question sort of helps guide us to that. So if we're talking about so we're talking about beliefs, and now we're going to focus on this special set of beliefs. Some of the beliefs you hold are true, right? And amongst those true beliefs, some of those are things you stumbled onto by accident. Like if just say randomly, if you said, well, I think Jupiter has an odd number of atoms in it. Well, that might be true. But can you really, is that really knowledge? Can you say that you actually know it? And again, I don't mean confidence. I mean, is it something we want to call knowledge? Well, it is if you can justify it. So, of course, this is where we're going to have issues of what do we mean by justification. But here's the thing. So you're looking at a belief and you're saying, well, do we want to call this knowledge? Well, knowledge is one of those beliefs that is justified and is true. So that means we're going to have two things we have to test it for. So we're going to hold up this belief. We're going to apply two tests for it. Well, yes, you believe it. So it's in that set. The next two tests are, is it a justified belief? We're going to have a hell of a discussion about that. I mean, how do you say that something is justified? So, okay. Let's rain check that for the moment. We're going to construct something that would serve as a good definition for what we mean to say when we assess that a belief is justified. We're going to have some test for that. Right now we don't, but we'll get to it. But you know that it's essential that it's true. So some belief that I hold, I would know that it's knowledge if I know that it's true. But how would I come to know that it's true? Right? Without being able to do a direct examination of the thing. I mean, we're going right back to the whole, you could be a brain in a jar, right? I mean, you can't, because we're doing inferences. We're trying to learn about this mind-independent reality around us. And we form beliefs about that reality. And sometimes some of our beliefs are formed through some process of justification, right? We come to our reasoning through justification. But the other standard of knowledge is that just because you have a justified belief, I mean, you may have very, very good reason to believe something, but you just happen to be wrong about it, right? So it is a justified belief, but it's not true. So we need to make a distinction between justified untrue beliefs, mistaken beliefs that are still justified, and knowledge, the justified true beliefs. The only distinction between those two groups of beliefs, they're both justified, they're both beliefs. The only distinction is whether or not they're true. Well, the only way we can test for whether or not it's true is to have access to reality, right? And that kind of pulls the carpet out from under the whole exercise here. We're talking about a world where we don't have access to know for a fact that something is true or false, but we're reasoning towards it and forming beliefs based on this reasoning process. So then when you hold up one of those beliefs and say, well, if I'm going to decide that this is knowledge, I have to first assess whether or not it's true. But how do I know that it's true? Well, that's what the whole exercise is reasoning towards the truth of it. So if I say something like, the sky's blue, that is a justified belief. It's my belief, and it's a justified belief. And if it happens to be true, well, I'm not going to know for sure if it's really true. But if it happens to be true, then yes, it's knowledge. If you ask me if it's knowledge, I'm going to say, I'm pretty sure it's knowledge. I believe that it's knowledge because I believe that it's true. And I believe that it's justified. So therefore it's knowledge. But the problem is I can't know that it's knowledge because I can't actually know the truth value, mind independent. The KK problem, they call it. You can't know that you know.
And what also about the Gettier problem with, let's say, JTB, with the Gettier cases? I'm trying to figure out an example.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest before somebody launches into it that I actually don't think, this is a bit of sort of personal thing. I hear people talk about it, and the Gettier problems point out a problem with justified true belief being a good definition for knowledge. But I find it such a contrived minority situation. So it's, and they always come up with these crazy examples. Like you think that there's, you'd seen somebody take 5 coins off of a table and put them in their pocket. So you now have a belief that they hold 5 coins in their pocket. And of course, it's a justified belief because it's based on a reliable belief forming mechanism. It's based on reliable sensory input, and it's based on reliable memory. So by the way, I give you a hint there. My view of justification is reliabilism. So it's a weird RTB version of the JTB, but for something to be justified, in my view, it has to be a belief that's formed through a reliable belief forming mechanism. So okay, there, I use my reliable senses relatively, and my memory, and and I have a belief that he has 5 coins in his pockets. But let's say it turned out that he had a coin in his pocket before he put those other 5 in. But then on the way out of the room, so I'd be wrong because he doesn't have exactly 5, he has exactly 6. But so I have a mistaken belief. It's a justified belief, but it's mistaken. So therefore it's not knowledge. But let's say he stands up and walks out of the room and there's a loose seam inside the pocket and one of the coins falls out onto the floor. Well, at that moment, my belief suddenly becomes true. And now it's knowledge, ? Is anybody comfortable with that distinction? That somehow a mistaken belief can be promoted to knowledge because of some other unseen event. Now, this is a highly contrived example, but it's an example where you have a belief that is justified by any objective standard, but it's for the wrong reasons. And then it turns out to be, it happens to be true. Are you comfortable calling that knowledge? And Gettier would say, well, no, we shouldn't call that knowledge. Myself, I think that's a bit of a distraction from the whole issue of it. But I'm curious what you guys think.
Gettier, the example you gave was pretty close to the example he gave. He was talking about coins in a certain situation, but Gettier said that justified true belief is not sufficient for knowledge.
Yeah, well, I think a simpler example would be the sheep example, where there are, I think, what they use, where you're looking at a field and you see a sheep in the field, and you say, first, it's justified, it's true, and you believe it. You see the sheep in the field, but it turns out that sheep is actually a dog. But behind a tree, there's an actual sheep in the field. So there was a sheep in the field. You were justified. It was actually true, and you believed it. But you like Hogtie was saying, it was a mistaken belief. So, is that did you have knowledge there was actually a sheep in a field, or would we call that knowledge? And I think that's what Gettier was trying. That's the Gettier example. He was trying to figure out that a mistaken. If you come to the truth by mistake, is that actual knowledge?
Yeah, so I'm going to throw in the words, correct belief, mistaken justification.
That's correct. Yeah. Correct belief, mistaken justification. Yes, I'm sorry.
But we're saying that's not knowledge, though.
Well, yeah. I think people, I would say that, yeah, because no, it's justified. Honestly, I'm not perturbed by it. I know a lot of people think that, and maybe I'm just not seeing the light here for why this is such an important issue. I think these are the sort of the rarity exceptions that so you have to kind of, pinch your lip and ponder. Well, that's really interesting, but I don't think it actually perturbs. Like, to me, it doesn't seem. I know lots of people disagree with me. It doesn't seem to worthwhile to sort of upset the whole ship, throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's what I'm looking for. Like, yeah, justified true belief is a totally sensible way to proceed discussing what we mean by knowledge. And I would encourage all the philosophers of the world to just move forward from there. And yes, there's this interesting little quirky problem, the sheep behind the tree or the hole in the pocket or whatever. But to me, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But, other people.
In other words, you're saying it's a working definition until we can get something better.
So all of these problems, as convoluted as they sound, are actually gross simplifications. They are the simplest possible examples that you can bring up of how it could happen, where you can clearly and unequivocally show that it would happen in those circumstances. Now, the reason why that is such a big problem is because our knowledge is not a fact. Our knowledge is coherent structure of beliefs and knowledges and facts that we share among each other, build upon, use to explain the universe, and reason towards further explanations, broadening our epistemic limits, right? Broadening our horizons. Every such example, to any degree, that you ascribe as knowledge, as certain, as absolute, as true, without need for further correction, kind of dilutes the whole structure of knowledge, like not of that one fact, but of everything that you can possibly know. Now, if philosophy is the search for being as right as possible and the least amount of wrong as possible, then it's quite obvious why that is such a big and important question in philosophy. Now, in your everyday life, as you're driving past a field and you look out and you see a sheep and say, look, there's a sheep that's not going to change anything in your world at all. But it does have fairly far-reaching repercussions for science, because science is built upon epistemology.
But one thing I want to ask about for the RTB fans is that there's like a form of Gettier cases that are problematic for RTB, right? The what is it? The lion, the duck with the lion example, where you have this person in the jungle, and every time a lion comes by to attack them, they duck, and the lion goes over like a chasm or whatever. So they continuously do this, and it always works. So it's reliable, it's true. But at a point, they think this is the best way to defend themselves against lions, and they start teaching everybody else. But it's not really it's, even though it's reliable, it's not true that this is the reason why the lion's not devouring them. It may be some other reason. I forget the exact example, but there's like an example that they have, like a Gettier case for RTB, that where something is reliable and it works all the time, but it just happens to be something matter of fact. It's actually not the reason why this thing is true. It's the correlation versus the causation problem.
I don't think that any one piece of knowledge is like supposed to be the end all be all to any one solution, right? I don't think that any of that's to me that seems like an unrealistic expectation for literally anything. It could be just the most the most mundane everyday activity, one simple fact to kind of guide you. That's always that these beliefs, these claims, whatever you want to call them, are never in a vacuum. So I don't really see much of an issue when what I understand that that one piece of information will never only be used in only one solitary space alone.
Let me put it this way. Remember that the whole exercise here is kind of why I'd opened with this at the beginning of our broadcast here, was to say that, in my view at least, and I think most people would agree with me on this, is that what we're doing here is we're recognizing that we do reason, and we come to beliefs. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong, and we're asking the question, well, how does this work? Just like if any one of us can go pick up a ball and throw it some distance and say, how do we do that? Well, you'd have to know something about anatomy and how muscles work and whatever. And one of us may be able to study it and come to correct beliefs about how we throw a ball, right? Somebody else might have a different view. The point is we all throw a ball the same way. We're just coming to understand this. So here's the situation. As far as I understand it, here's reality: is that we do reason, all of us reason, and we sometimes have we have justified beliefs. We have unjustified beliefs. Sometimes we reason ourselves to beliefs that happen to comport with reality. And how awesome is that? Sometimes we don't, right? Sometimes we form beliefs that turn out not to comport with reality. So the whole epistemological exercise is to say, okay, look, we recognize that we have belief forming, and sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong. The problem here is that we don't really have perfect access to reality, right? Okay, well, let's go ahead and discuss it. Okay, fine. So somebody comes up with, okay, well, belief, knowledge, justified true belief. Well, hold on a sec. There's a problem with justified true belief. And you come up with like the Gettier examples, where you say, well, here are some examples where justified true belief doesn't give you perfect access to reality. Oh, okay. Well, let's throw that baby out with the bathwater. Well, somebody, oh, how about reliable? Okay, so reliable belief. And then the example that Drag just gave, give me a keyword, Drag, which is the one you just used. It suddenly slipped my mind weirdly. What did you just?
I think I had said, well, how is this one fact, right, just going to be used in isolation?
No. It was the example somebody used to shoot down. Maybe it was Nate who said it. Shoot down the reliable.
Yeah, it was Nate.
Oh yeah, I was talking
other
about
black guy.
I was just saying. The example was something that happened. It's correlation, not causation. Something that occurs all the time.
Okay, duck lion.
A lion,
duck
yeah,
lion.
ducking
Okay.
lion.
Okay, yeah. So there's an example. You can say, well, look, when you're when you form a belief based on based on reliability, well, that tends to work out pretty well. But then somebody can say, oh, wait a minute, how about this lion duck thing? That's an example that shows that justified true belief doesn't give you perfect access to reality. Well, do you want to throw that baby out with that bathwater? I mean, remember that anything that you come up with is a theory of knowledge or a theory of justification. There's always going to be somebody who can say, well, here's an example where that doesn't work. And that's an interesting exercise. But I don't think you should take away from it, well, then therefore it's wrong. That it's somehow mistaken to look at knowledge as being justified true belief or reliable true belief, because the whole exercise is we don't have perfect access to reality. So anytime somebody says, oh, well, here's a counterexample that shows that using that reasoning method means that we wouldn't have perfect access to reality, well, that's not discounting the theory, that's confirming it, because we know that we don't have perfect access to reality. That's perfectly consistent with our experience.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's why philosophers still have jobs.
But do they really have jobs?
If you would call it that.
Hey, are you justified with that true belief?
I am. I know in such a way for it to be true.
So let me ask this, and maybe this will kind of lead us to what Drag had said he wanted to talk about. When you talk about knowledge, is all knowledge based on antecedent knowledge?
So it sounds like you're talking about the axiomatic branch of the Munchausen trilemma.
That would be infinite. It would be infinite regress. So if like every piece of knowledge was based on a preceding piece of knowledge, then I mean,
yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I'm not looking at the page at all. I'm trying to go by memory because I can never remember all of them.
Well, I mean, okay. Well, let me. This is something I do know something about.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks to Saka, in most part. So the Munchausen trilemma, the three horns of it are what you mentioned: axiomatic, infinite regress, or circularity.
Sure. Yeah. And they correlate with the three epistemic frameworks of coherentism, infinitism, and foundationalism.
Right, and so Drag, who I believe has said that he is a foundherentist, would say that certain beliefs and knowledge that he have bottom out at a properly basic belief.
So the way I like to describe it, and Saka has a wonderful little, I guess, heuristic on how he portrays this, is that you can think of it like you're out in the middle of the ocean and you are on a piece of flotsam, right? And so you can simply attach things to it, and there's no real like piece, right? And in his example, that is like the founding piece, right? They all connect to one another. But with mine, if you could think of, there is actually a large circular piece that is much more sturdier than all the others, and then everything else is attached to it, but also attached to one another. That would be an illustration of kind of how I believe, like where that centerpiece there are my properly basic beliefs. My memory is reliable, just to give a really, simple one.
And then your properly basic beliefs, each one of them would fall on one of the horns of the Munchausen trilemma.
Ideally, but that's something that I've not actually sat down and thought through, right? Because I think that would be a nice little interesting exercise, because I'm trying my best to describe what I believe is, I guess, the framework of my cognitive faculties, right? And that's a pretty hard task when you really sit down and think about it.
Well, the properly basic beliefs thing is, it's always got to come to that. I mean, I subscribe to that view as well. I mean, the problem is that you'll hear people like they'll either describe or they'll list properly basic beliefs, but there's a bit of a weird intangible property to it. But I always remember, like Ozzy, for example, using the term about these are beliefs that we don't sit and think about and conclude. These are things that we drink in with our mother's milk, right? That is to say that literally in the formative process of the brain, like when you're still pooping in a diaper and crawling around, and when you're still at the age where you don't realize when a ball rolls behind the couch, it actually hasn't disappeared, it still exists, that you start to learn, you just come to accept that there is a mind-independent reality. You come to accept that there are other minds that are out there to be met with and converse with you. What's another one? The idea of generally reliable memory, right? Not perfectly reliable memory, but generally reliable memory, generally reliable senses, that you're not being just constantly lied to by your senses. The thing that makes properly basic beliefs not merely basal or foundational beliefs, or things you assume so that you can do some reasoning. They're things that are kind of thrust upon you as your brain develops. It's some of the features of them is that they're irrevisable. Like you don't ever conclude that they're true. You just accept that they're true as your brain forms. And they're irrevisable. And if you want to prove that to yourself, just take a run at it. Pick any one of those things. How about the belief that you exist? Now, just take a moment to ponder what you could, so start by reasoning, okay, I don't exist. I'm going to change that belief. I don't exist. Well, now how the fuck are you reasoning? Like when you eject, any attempt to eject one of these properly basic, there's basic beliefs, the thing that makes them proper is they're incorrigible and they're irrevisable. So just try to jettison one of them. So, I mean, Dragnaugt's using the coherentist model of the raft, which I think it really paints a picture. It's such a great example that your belief is formed, you're sort of out floating, there's no foundation to it, but you're sort of lashing on these little bits. And the more, as your belief structure builds and builds and builds, as long as they're coherent, as long as they fit well together, you're going to be okay. But then you're going to get pieces that don't fit. So you're going to have to throw out, you're going to say, well, I can't include that in each of these pieces, hopefully obvious from Drag's explanation, these pieces are beliefs. So a new belief floats along in the water. Do you want to grab it and lash it onto your belief structure? Or do you want to see that it doesn't fit? So you're going to throw it out. But if there's a belief that looks like it fits, it would fit really, really, really well, except for this one other belief that kind of gets in the way. Well, you might want to unlash that belief and jettison it so that you can adopt this other belief. And that's kind of the coherentist view. But the foundherentist thing is to say some of those beliefs aren't things that you came to, that you elected to lash onto your raft, and might at some point eject them and jettison them. Because go ahead and try to take your raft and unlash from it the belief that you exist. Now, how do you reason? Try to throw out the idea that your senses have at least some reliability to them. How do you reason? Try to imagine how your raft floats if you have literally no memory. These are things that are just incomprehensible, right? So the foundherentist would say that there's a core, there's kind of a keel to this raft that is those properly basic beliefs, and that's the thing you got to clutch onto. Whenever you lash on new beliefs into your beliefs, your coherent belief structure, you're lashing them onto an assembly that at its core has the properly basic beliefs. But beyond those, every little piece of flotsam and jetsam that comes along has to be assessed against your existing raft and see if it fits, or see if it might fit if you eject something else. And it's a delightful analogy, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, that's why I just kind of attached, my own to it. Say, you know what, the difference with mine is that centerpiece that Sokka sits on, that's actually kind of a pylon that extends all the way down, and I'm just attaching other things to it, where that central piece representing properly basic beliefs.
Oh, you're saying you're well rooted?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Well, I'll tell you why I don't like that. Sorry, now you're saying that I referred to it as a keel, the sort of central core, but now you're saying that, well, no, there's actually a pillar and that thing is grounded. The reason I'm concerned about that is because how would you, to say that it's grounded, that's to say that there's something supporting it. That is to say there's some justification. So how would you proceed to provide a justification to me or to yourself? Just pick any one of your properly basic beliefs. And right here, go
Okay,
Well, right,
I'm
and
just
that goes-
accepting that it is, but so the belief that it is well grounded is something that I'm presuming. There's no way that I'm going to go all the way down there, literally, right? But then we get back to it. It's like, well, hold on for a second.
You're grounding your properly basic beliefs in your belief that they are grounded.
Yeah,
Well, right,
it's
and that's
just you see what I did there?
That was nice. That was
Oh my
nice.
God.
You see what I did?
Oh my God.
Hey, but quick question to the panel.
Somebody turn on the Aussie signal.
I'm trying to get in here. I'm trying to get in here.
Go ahead.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It kind of goes back to what I was saying a few moments ago. Like, if it can't be on a pillar because any properly basic belief is either going to rely on circularity, that it's axiomatic, or that it's an infinite regress. So, I mean,
but I do want to, you know what? Over that question that you just asked, John. One time I was arguing with a precept, and the question came up: why do we call properly basic beliefs? Because under any theory of knowledge, they would be considered knowledge, justified true belief, reliable true belief. They fit all those categories, and by compunction, they seem to be true. So it's just like, why are they just considered beliefs and not statements of knowledge?
Because they're unjustified. I just did that to Drag. I'm going to do it to you now.
Yeah.
So go ahead. So if you're going to say that your belief that there's a mind-independent reality, I'll tell you what. Do you believe there's a mind-independent reality? That's your belief. Now, you're going to tell me that it's knowledge, meaning that in your view, it is justified true belief. So go ahead and trot out for me. What is your justification that there exists a mind-independent reality?
I have no justification. You're right. I have absolutely no justification.
I know it in such a way to be true. Say it.
Yeah, I know it to be true because it's true, right? The
world would not make sense if that were not true.
Yeah, it's just like I don't know. It's just like a hole in my mind here, because I'm like, it's like, we rely on them. So like, I'm trying to fit. Like, I was arguing with someone not the other day, like maybe like almost a year ago. It could have been like a year. I think it might have been Dawkins or something. And we were trying to wrestle with this fact of, like these not justified true beliefs, but properly basic beliefs, what they are. Since we have to employ them to do any reasoning, it's like, like I don't know. Matter of fact, let's move on from the question, because it's like blowing up my mind right now. I'm trying to figure out what I want to say.
That's why I conceded. I said, you know what? That centerpiece extends all the way down, and there's no way that I know that. I'm saying that I believe that. I can't prove that. But it's a pillar. I know it's a pillar, right? Because I can't attach any flotsam to it without accepting that from the onset.
Well, you know what? The reliable true belief. The example that the person gave about reliable true belief, like, it is reliable, right? There is no instance in which the properly basic beliefs are not true. So they are reliable. They are true, and we believe them. So under RTB, it seems like it does work. And they gave an example for justified true belief too. And I was like, oh. And they were like, well, if under any of these concepts, why aren't they considered knowledge? Now under JTB, I can't answer Hogtie's question, but I think under reliable true belief, I do think there's an argument there that, hey, they are reliable, they are true, and we believe them.
And real quick, before anybody responds to that, I just want to jump in. The thing that gave me the idea for this stream is a stream that's going to be taking place in just 1 hour on modern day debate. They're going to have on Sygart, a Christian, Rabbi John Grishala, who's Jewish, and Eliakai, who is a polytheist, and Suris, who is an atheist, for a four-way battle of ideologies. But go ahead.
Wait. So it's in 1 hour? No, you got to call them and tell them to delay it, because we're not going to be done by then. Like, let's promise the audience right now, we are going to stay here and we're going to discuss this until we solve epistemology.
We're going to get it done.
So I hear Barney. Yeah, I hear Barney unmuted. Barney, were you taking other people were talking? Did you just open your mic to provide a justification for properly basic beliefs? Is that what you were doing? Reductio? Yeah, I think that's what I heard. I will rewind and listen. But just for clarity, I know people try this. They'll say, well, there's a reductio argument. So if you say, well, if there isn't a mind-independent reality, then stuff doesn't make sense. So that leads to contradictions. There's all confusing, whatever. So therefore, those things must be true. You can take any one of these properly basic beliefs, and to assume its negation leads to an absurdity. Therefore, the negation is false. Therefore, the properly basic belief is true. That's the correct structure of the reductio ad absurdum. But the problem is it doesn't lead to a contradiction. The problem is the consequence of denying a properly basic belief is irrationality. So all you're really saying, if somebody were to come to, I'm not accusing you of this, Barney. It was a great opening for me to jump on it. If somebody comes to me and says, well, I can jettison my belief in a mind independent reality, well, I can't do that because then I wouldn't be able to reason. That doesn't mean there's a contradiction. All you're saying is, I wouldn't like to live in a world where there's no mind-independent reality because I wouldn't be able to reason. It's not a proper reductio.
It's not a cul-de-sac. It's literally a street leading into an abyss. Like, yes, you can do that. That's perfectly valid. There is nothing irrational entering that cul-de-sac. You ain't never coming out of there with anything valuable in any way. You are literally denying yourself the ability to reason. And that's the only counter that I have to stuff like solipsism and universal skepticism, where, sorry, if that's the case, that might be the case. If that's the case, then I literally know nothing. What I am thinking is completely meaningless.
Yeah, if you're wrong about one of your properly basic beliefs, then you've got bigger problems with your epistemology than worrying about whether or not you make sense in a Google Hangout or whatever this is, StreamYard.
So
we just hold on to our properly basic beliefs because, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
But properly basic beliefs are just axioms of sort. There is a way to reason to them, just not from something more basic.
Well, right, you can reason to them, but can you reason beyond them?
No.
Or without them.
And that's why I'm a coherentist. There is a view of in mathematics, when you look at axioms, there is a view that any sufficient set of any claims is a set of axioms. You don't need to have these axioms that we use. If you take any set of claims in mathematics, any sufficiently large set of claims in mathematics, you can connect them and deductively reason from them, and some of your conclusions will be the things that we now consider axioms. Right? So if you start off with your experience in the philosophical sense, if you start off with your experience or with some of the things that you consider conclusions, you can reason back to the properly basic beliefs. Right? So I don't think that they're special in any sense. I don't think that they're unfounded. I think they are founded in their consequences, in their observed consequences, in their experienced consequences. You just then have to take those observations to be properly basic. You need to take something to be properly basic, but you can always rearrange the structure so that which is unjustified is justified in other things. And that's why I'm a coherentist.
Make it sound like it's just that easy, man. It's just like you can just choose a belief, man. No, no. Mm-mm.
Well, so if you're a coherentist, then you don't have properly basic beliefs, then.
Well, I have the same beliefs, right? I just don't believe that they are the foundation that you need to have as such to build up to other things. I believe that you can build down to those beliefs from other things which are self-evident. One curious thing is that what we are talking about, the properly basic beliefs and the axioms in the sets that I'm describing, in philosophy, those are called presuppositions. The self-evident, uncontested truths. Right? the presuppositionalism would kind of like to make their claims to be presuppositions, but unfortunately their claims are contested.
Well, so is it just to, because there's going to be 3 different types of theists and 1 atheist in the stream that's coming up at 9:30 on Modern Day Debate. And by the way, everybody, the link to that stream is in the video description. I mean, so some of you have brought up presuppositionalists a few times. And so what about when people claim that their God belief is a properly basic belief, or that they have properly basic beliefs that kind of, hinge on their belief in God, or they kind of beg the question
That's something that's interesting. Sokka actually covered a bit of that, where I think Skyout was trying to state that his God belief was a properly basic belief. So there's a way to demonstrate that if you are going to establish a claim as a properly basic belief, then there's a certain, not form, but there's a certain requirement, right? Because you just can't arbitrarily say, well, chocolate cake is my properly basic belief. How in your, decision-making processes or your cognitive faculties does it actually play a role, other than you claiming it does? Because I can't state that, I think the Saints will win this year in the Super Bowl. Well, that's an interesting belief you have there. I base that off of what I've seen of the Saints. Well, I kind of need my memory to be reliable in order for me to know that there's a team called the Saints, or that they've ever played a sport, much less what is a sport. I kind of need to remember what that is first, right? So that properly basic belief serves a function in that belief, but you don't have people doing that with their supposed God properly basic belief.
So there is another question of kind of meta epistemology that needs to be answered, like for watching, let's say, intercultural debates, and that is, what is the value of knowledge? Where does the value lie in knowledge? Is it better to be to have as much knowledge as possible, even though you might be wrong about some things? Is it more important to accumulate as much knowledge as possible? Is it more important to have as little things wrong? Or is there some balance in between those? And I think that's kind of one of the biggest disparities between a theistic way of thinking and atheistic way of thinking, and science versus philosophy, where if you take theory of values such as the inference to the best explanation, you will always wind up with God. Always. Why? Because eventually you will hit an epistemic limit. You will hit a point in your reasoning where you can reason no further because you do not have any more information. You have reached the wall of your ignorance. And then the only way that you can explain or describe what's beyond the wall is by invoking probabilities, invoking that which would most easily and most simply explain everything that's beyond that wall of ignorance. And that will always be God. And that's why God of the gaps is such a powerful argument for them, right? An omnipotent being that can do whatever is required can solve all of the problems beyond the wall of ignorance. So if you are greedy for knowledge, if you want to, that's kind of what Darth Dawkins appeals to. Like, we need to know. You don't really know anything unless you presuppose God. But if you presuppose God to explain that foundation of everything, then our knowledge that stems from later from that, the consequences of that have have a grounding, have a foundation, and all of your knowledge is suddenly actual knowledge. It is suddenly real, objective. So if you're greedy for that, then God makes sense. And that's a reasonable position, unfortunately. We are... Go ahead.
No, what I was going to say, I mean, and Darth Dawkins even takes it further, unless you presuppose God, not only can't you know anything, but you can't even have access to any of the devices you would use to know something, like reasoning and logic. And
I mean, that's an interesting claim, but like, how would he actually demonstrate that, right? I mean, it's you hear people say, things like that, and you have to wonder, well, if you actually put this into practice, how would you demonstrate that someone doesn't have access to this information? So, because the inference from that, to me at least, is you know something that I don't, right? You have access to it, and if I don't know what it is, then it's kind of hard for me to gauge what that is. What people, like, anyone can tell you a piece of information that you don't know. Someone can teach you something, but the second that they profess whatever it is to you, then you have access to it, right? So I would love for him to kind of put on a demonstration of how this works, the mechanism by which the belief in this deity grants you special knowledge, and what specifically is that knowledge. So those are two hurdles that I think that he isn't prepared to satisfy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I tried to indicate that is why it's important to identify what the value of knowledge is for you. In scientific thinking, in kind of more modern thinking, with Karl Popper and the development of sciences and the philosophy of science, it became obvious that way of being overly hungry for knowledge introduces mistakes, and introduces mistakes that cannot easily be resolved, and that that it is not enough to just accumulate knowledge, that you have to eliminate wrong knowledge, right? That you have to actively seek out where you are wrong, however you can, and that it is better not to know. It is better to be ignorant in some sense, curious but ignorant,
than to claim knowledge where it's not really true knowledge.
Precisely.
And Hogtie, you were trying to get in?
I was just thinking about DD gets mentioned. The only time that DD should ever come up in a discussion about epistemology is in a Goofus and Gallant type description, because he knows a lot of the words. He's his thinking is so muddled. He doesn't understand any epistemology at all. I mean, even on the thing that Drag was mentioned, I mean, you could take any proposition. So here's the proposition: the sky is blue. Do you believe that's true? Believe that's false? He'll say, I believe that's true. And then I'll say, I believe that's true. And I'll say, oh, good, you agree with me. He goes, no, I don't. Like he has some weird fucked up knowledge or notion about what belief is, to include that, like even though you hold the same doxastic position on that proposition, I think it's true, you think it's true, he's going to say, no, we don't agree. Because he then wants to feather in a whole bunch of things about the justification. Well, I have a different understanding of why it's true, and you cannot possibly have any understanding of why it's true. Therefore, we don't agree. And you say, no, just on that one position, we agree. And so, like, little things like that, which it just shows he literally doesn't understand the most foundational things that we've been talking about here. He reads books, and he learns phrases like, you're filibustering, and I have a knockdown argument. It's irrefutable. Like, okay, that's not philosophy. That's just jackassery.
And what you just said too is a refutation to his claim, because he claims that you can't even come to knowledge without accepting God, without presupposing God, and then there you are describing a certain fact where you both agree that it's true, but he's saying, well, no, I don't agree with you.
Yeah,
I mean, so
well,
that kind of like tears down his whole argument, really.
it gets worse than that, actually, because you ask him, were you born a presuppositionalist? Well, no, that's silly. Well, you gained knowledge before you were a presuppositionalist, right? You knew the facts about the world, right? So what you're saying is demonstrably false. No one's born a presuppositionalist. So it is, I guess, in the midst of these conversations, people tend to forget some of the most simplest things, and that being one of them. Because if you were to ask him that, he's not going to really go there with you, because he knows like that is a defeater for what he is trying to espouse. It's just patently false.
And not that we should get too far into this, but just as sort of an amusing note about how dopey some of those guys are. We don't want to do yet another broadcast on why precept sucks. It's been done for quickly and easily for years. But this part I always find funny is that when he says, well, then you can't know anything. Interesting bit of spitting on the Bible. It's not just that when he says you can't know anything, that he is sort of running afoul of many different lines of philosophical reasoning, because what's the harm? Right? If you don't agree with philosophers, great. Then you come up with your own philosophy or don't bother, whatever. You're free to do that. But if you claim to be a Christian, and then you're going to take an important point of Scripture, where Scripture expressly states that non-believers do have knowledge, and then you say, oh yeah, but you can't know anything. You can't possess knowledge. Okay, well then piss on that part of Scripture. I guess it's not important to you. I guess the Bible got that wrong there, Dee.
Well, I'll tell you what, that was so interesting what Drag said a moment ago, and my mind is still stewing on that, is that Darth claims you can't gain any knowledge without first presupposing God or believing in God, yet he was not born a presuppositionalist, and he attained knowledge before becoming one. So that's like a circular, like steaming pile of shit on top of his argument, I guess. I mean, that's just,
Yeah, exactly.
blows my mind. So where do you think we're at, guys? You think we have now Hogtie suggested that we stay here until we solve all the problems. I'm not game for that. So where do you think we're at in the discussion? Is there anything that didn't get brought up that any of you fellas want to touch on?
It's okay, John. You can leave.
You want me to leave?
We're just going to keep going. Yeah. No, I'm honestly, I'm going to sort of restate a position, but now with the audience having heard us sort of kick around some of these issues, I would actually recap my whole position as saying, you know what, great, you talk about knowledge and belief how you want, but there is sort of a formal way of talking about it. And then when it comes down to theories of knowledge and theories of justification, none of them are right and none of them are wrong. And that's not to say that this whole area, the philosophies, you know, what did Edie Brickell say? Philosophy is a walk in the slippery rocks, you know. Philosophy is a smile on a dog. I can't remember what the fuck your song was. But you know what I mean? It's just like, it's not to say that all of this stuff is higgledy-piggledy. The philosophers are thinking about these things in a systematic way. But these theories give you ways of thinking about how you think, right? About reasoning about how you reason. And it can actually help you understand even how to be better at your reasoning. But don't, by any stretch of the imagination, nobody listening to this should think that there is actually a solution, that there's a proper wording of an expression of how we actually reason. Just like any theory in science, these are approximations, some better than others, that we're sort of working towards understanding ourselves and our processes a little bit better. But it's not, there's no team that's going to sort of win this debate or battle, because it's an ongoing process.
Hey, Hogtie, I didn't know that you were a postmodernist.
Ouch. I think that's an insult, but I choose to believe it's not.
Good.
And how do you know that? So I guess what we'll do, and I don't know if you know it, Hogtie, but your camera just popped on. There you go.
I'm fumbling buttons here. I meant to unmute to go, Brock, how do you know that? How do you know that? But yeah. Now that I'm 10 seconds late with that, I screwed it up.
Well, and somebody posted in the chat a little bit ago, you know, don't say presuppositionalist 3 times, or Psi 10 Bruggenkate will appear. But yeah, I think we're going to wrap this up. give anybody who wants to go watch the modern day debate stream at 9:30 a chance to maybe have something to eat and go to the bathroom or smoke a big fatty or something before they head over there. So let's just go right around and everybody, give their final thoughts and let us know if you've got anything coming up that you want people to know about. We'll start with. Oh, go ahead.
Because I already said that was my concluding statement. I thought you're supposed to smoke a fatty before the next show. I thought we were supposed to smoke a fatty before this show.
Oh, okay.
That explains a lot, doesn't it? No, I already gave my concluding statements. I mean, philosophy is fun. It's an enlightening, interesting exercise, but it's not a political exercise. There are no camps. People are just sort of trying to present ways that they think we think, and we'll get closer and closer as we think about it more. But don't get married to any particular notion in philosophy. It's a work in progress.
These are all just different ways of thinking about it.
Yeah. My final thoughts, I guess. Let's see, September 27th, around 6:30 p.m. Hogtie Champ's going to be on the Magic Sandwich Show, along with DPR and Arn, and they're going to talk about their respective Pornhub channels.
Wait.
Luckily, mine is already named Hogtie Champ.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Hogtie was very worried when I messaged him that, hey, Nakasuchi couldn't find a picture or an avatar of you, so he just found an image online of someone in the act of hog tying. And Hogtie said he ran over to look at it. He's like, oh, wait, that's not what I think it is.
It's a cowboy thing. Oh, okay, that's fine then. Yeah, I was okay with it then.
So even though the end of that sentence sounded kind of wanky, there is actually an episode of the Magic Sandwich Show coming up on that date and time.
Yep. We already have our guests, and I won't reveal who they are, but we're going to be talking about Second Amendment, and someone in this hangout is going to be hosting it. So it's going to be a very, very interesting conversation because of the perspectives of all the guests. It's going to be around 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, and the promotional material is being made as soon as I get a hold of some folks. So, yeah.
And so as I do, every time I have a stream, I will get a linked comment under the video once it posts with, everybody's information and a link to the Magic Sandwich Show. And Barney, did you get to say everything you wanted to say in closing, or did you have more for us?
I don't have anything coming up. I guess I can thank the panel for an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed this. And that's it.
And just
Nate has sent to me his closing words. He says, I'm just going to read it off the thing. He says, Hogtie was right. He has changed my thinking on everything.
That's an interesting question. Did anybody hear from Nate? What happened to him?
He might have disconnected. Ooh.
Well, yeah, I just assumed maybe his phone died or something. He had switched over to his phone at one point because the computer was dying, and I just didn't know if one of you folks was texting buddies with him or something, and maybe you've heard from him. So,
John.
Yes.
How about you? Did we make anything clear for you?
Well, I was just going to ask, where you guys thought we got with this, if we got anywhere. And I guess where I'm at now, there are a couple of points that were made clearer to me. But my conclusion after this conversation is that I have a lot more investigation and studying to do, because I don't think that it was very interesting, and there were a few things that I learned, but I don't think I'm much further ahead than when I got here tonight. And, I think that's just because, like what you and I were talking before the stream, Barney, is that, once you get beyond just the rudimentary understanding of these subjects, there's so many intricacies and rabbit holes and different categories that, I mean, I think you had said, it could take you years to study it and to come anywhere close to fully understanding it. So,
Yeah, I think that's fair.
but always interesting. I always love the conversations I get to listen into on Discord, and I want to thank you guys all for being here tonight. Thank you to Nate for being here, like I said, I'll get everybody's information in a pinned comment. As far as my final words, my channel is the Amateur Conversationalist. I do one-on-ones on Sunday afternoons. Last Sunday, Drag was my guest. I linked to that in the live chat a couple times tonight, and I'll put that in the pinned comment as well. You can find me here most Wednesday nights on A Raging Atheist, and thanks once again to Nakasuchi for allowing me to do this. And you can find me most Saturday nights on the Great Debate Community. We'll be doing something there this Saturday. And thank you, everybody who came to watch. And as Nakasuchi says, be the conversation.
I like that.